So is silicone toxic? Yeah, some of it totally is. I'm going to break down some of the studies on how you can tell whether or not your silicone is actually safe. There's one study that tested 44 different silicone bakeware molds from different European countries. They found 112 different volatile organic compounds that leached out. There was another study that tested silicone utensils. 96% of them had at least mild cytotoxicity, which is cell death. There were 21 different metals that actually leached out in that study. However, the most troubling study just came out recently. They were looking at 16 different reusable sports water bottles, okay? They put water in it and they let it sit there for a day. So all of the bottles that they tested were plastic with the exception of one type of silicone, and it was that kind of like collapsible silicone. I've seen these on Amazon. Out of all the ones they tested, guess which one was the most toxic? It was the silicone one. Oh yeah, so the silicone bottles released a huge amount of phthalates, right, which are linked to cancer and infertility and cardiovascular disease, but they also leached out DEET. Yes, that is an insect repellent and it's bad for you and you shouldn't eat it. The part that made silicone the worst is that it leached out the most amount of unknown chemicals. Not to mention the chemicals that they leached out, it was also leached in the highest amounts versus any other bottle that they tested. So how can you tell if your silicone is actually trustworthy and safe? Well, weirdly, it's kind of easier than plastic in some ways because in this case, you really get what you pay for. When a manufacturer uses cheap ingredients, well, it ends up being more harmful. And it really comes down to whether or not they are platinum cured. So platinum is the ingredient that they will use in the final curing step of very nicely well-made silicone, okay? However, if it's cheaply made, they're going to use peroxide and they end up using a lot of harmful ingredients as well. However, most brands don't mention whether or not they're platinum cured. Terms like food grade, that is pretty meaningless and it's not an indicator of whether or not it's actually safe. So here's where you're going to look for. You're going to look for a silicone that is really thick and not super flexible. A little flexibility is totally fine, but if it's super flexible, that means that it probably has lots of plasticizers and then they may potentially leach out. One good thing about this though is that there has been a lot of legislation specifically on children's products, right? And because of that, it means that basically anything made out of silicone that's for kids has to be platinum cured. As a result, the silicone that is used for baby bottle nipples as well as baby pacifiers have been shown to be super safe and non-toxic.